Okay, looks like I'm live finally. Let me come over here and turn off the audio for the live stream, which has just gone up right now. And let me do one more thing, which is kill that. Okay, good, much better. All right, how's everybody doing? Welcome to Red Pill 101. I am your host, Rollo Tomasi. I am the author of The Rational Male, the series of books, not just one, but there are three. That's The Rational Male Preventive Medicine, and Rational Male Positive Masculinity. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be looking at the chat for quite a bit today. We're going to play fast and loose here once again. I don't have Pat with me today. Pat has a family issue he had to take care of. And if he wants to talk about that later, I'll let him. But just for today, he's not here. But I am. And I wanted to actually start covering some things, some of the basics from my first book. I think that one of the reasons I wanted to start doing Red Pill 101 as a kind of it's almost like a remedial course. I don't want to say it's like, oh, well, this is where you got to go for, people who don't know anything about the red pill. It's just that people have a lot of questions. And I started this podcast because I wanted to, by the way, if you can't hear me, please let me know. I'm still kind of like flying blind here with the audio. But I started this podcast because I think I unfairly presumed that a lot of people already knew what I was talking about. Like I get a lot of people who will say, hey man, I've read The Rational Male like 4 times, man. What did you mean by this? Right. I was like, well, you've read it 4 times, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean they got it the first time. So they keep coming back to things and they're asking questions, and I'm all too happy to answer all of that. But that's why I started the Red Pill 101, because I wanted to explore some of the topics that are the most confusing, I think. We talked about hypergamy once before. We'll probably, I could probably talk about hypergamy, whenever, because it's so, I guess, ingrained in the red pill. It's not the be all end all. Again, red pill is really a praxology. It's a loose science. It's the study of human behavior from the perspective that human behavior has a purpose, or that there's a latent purpose to that. So it's not like just some sort of random thing, that there are motives and things. Thank you for the super chat. I'll be sounding off in and out of the chat here. I will be taking questions, but I will start taking them once we get into today's topic. Today's topic is going to be about desire. Next to things like mental point of origin, hypergamy, of course. There's lots of basics that people come up with. This is one of the basic ones. What is desire? How do I generate genuine desire? Why is it that I say, and this is one of my more famous comments, I guess, is you cannot negotiate genuine desire. So what that presents to us is a question. It's like, what is genuine desire, and what is negotiated desire, or what is contrived desire? And so that's what I'm going to get into today. If you have questions about that, if they come up, please, feel free. I run my stuff like workshops, even when I'm doing talks at, like, say, the 21 convention or the Man in Demand conference. I'm always interested in what people have to say while I'm saying it. Okay, so don't be afraid to raise your hand. I think a lot of people don't know this about me. There was back in the 1997, I was actually a teacher at one of the local community colleges, and I taught graphic design, actually, at the time, way back in the day when it was called desktop publishing. But I have a little bit of a background in teaching, so that's one of the reasons I'm kind of comfortable with a sort of a question and answer type thing. So, all right. So first thing off is, you cannot negotiate genuine desire. Why do I say that? Desire is probably the single most misunderstood thing that guys kind of choke on when they first. My dog's right here too. They choke on this idea at the very beginning, because most guys are betas. Okay, most guys, and again, I'm going to use the terms alphas and betas here. If you think that I'm using it unironically or ironically, whatever, that's fine. I don't care. They're placeholder terms, so I'm using this as a placeholder term. Most men, 80% of men. We go back to the Pareto principle here. Most men are betas. Most men will always be I should say, they all have their performance rated on the idea of how well they can serve the feminine imperative, how well they can serve women, how good a I don't say a tool, but how best they can be a utility to women. And that's really what the blue pill does, is it trains guys or conditions guys to be more useful, really. To be useful in the sense that they fit into one category or the other. They fit into either the beta provider or they fit into the alpha fucks, right? And I'm going to try not to swear too much, but that's alpha seed. Okay, so it's that short term interests, that short-term sexual interest. Sometimes it's long-term, right? I mean, it's not necessarily, you don't have to necessarily be alpha and just expect to have like just short-term sex. I mean, you can still be alpha and you can have long-term, right? But there is a separation between the different qualities of men. Okay, there's the guys that women want to have sex with, and there's the guys that women want to marry. Okay, hopefully it's the same guy and the same person, but that isn't always the case, and particularly in this day and age, it's a lot more different, as far as the difference between the two of them. It's like I think that women don't necessarily look for alpha and like the alpha seed guy and the beta need guy in the same guy. I think that they have like this kind of archetypes in their head, where if they found that guy who sort of mixed the best of both of them, or was like alpha all the time and just beta enough to be a good provider, or just beta enough to like be somewhat sensitive, I think that women would probably go for that guy, but they don't expect to find that in the same guy. And so, well, why is that? Well, who provokes natural desire? Now, to understand desire, we have to sort of break down hypergamy once again, just like I was saying before, alpha seed and beta need, and that's just what I'm going to go with for right now. And what happens is, there at different times of a woman's life, she's looking for something that, like, if she's like, say, in her sexual market value peak, her peak years, she's looking for the short-term sexual partner. Whereas when she gets into her later years, when she has to check out of the casino, when she has to get out before her sexual market value decays entirely, that's when she starts looking for provisioning and long-term security. Now, those are going to be important points here when we start talking about desire, because the desire is fundamentally rooted, I think, in arousal. And that's why when one of the reasons I got into discussing genuine desire versus sort of like contrived desire is because I had so many guys coming up to me and they would say, Rollo, I'm going to marriage counseling, or I just don't understand why the marriage counselor, who is almost always a woman, wants to sit down and draw up a list of draw up an agreement, right? Draw up a list of terms to negotiate, to say, okay, if you do this or you do that, you're going to have sex X amount of times, right? Most of the time when men and women go to a marriage counseling thing, it's usually to save that marriage, right? It's like they're thinking about divorcing, and usually that's like what I call last stop before toll. If you're going to marriage counseling, you're probably going to get divorced. As simple as that. That's not to say that some counselors don't know what they're talking about. I do, but I just think that in terms of their solutions, they think of things in terms of trust issues as opposed to desire issues. Okay, when a guy is, I want to say courting, but when a guy's having sex with his girlfriend before they get married, and then she becomes his wife, that relationship is based more upon her natural desire as it is the negotiation between what it is he will agree to do to maintain the relationship. So you've got there's two different aspects here, and they both relate to the alpha seed versus the beta need side. Okay, there is the difference between arousal and attraction. Arousal is where the desire is. Attraction is where that beta provisioning side of things is. And thanks for that $5 super. I will go look at that real quickly here. What do you think about LFA red pill guy? Dude spit straight toxicity, says anyone below 6'5" is beta. What I have no idea who this dude is. So if you want to leave me a red man on, I know you watch us on the red man group as well. If you want to drop me a link, I'll be happy to go check it out. But I have no idea who you're talking about. So sorry about that. Anyways, getting back to what I was saying is that there's a difference between arousal and attraction. Now, when you ask a woman, you say, what is it that you look for in a guy, right? We just yesterday we were talking to Alex Cortez, and he'd drawn up this list of all the things that would make a woman feminine, right? Basically a list of qualities that he was encouraging women to embody, or to at least broadcast, or to adopt, maybe internalize as part of themselves, to be more attractive, to be more feminine. If you want to be a feminine woman, here are the things that you need to do, right? Now, of course, women take that and they think, oh, well, he's just making these crazy demands, and who is he to make these demands upon me, but really, that list were things that would make for an attractive mate to a man. So when I was reading this, I kind of laughed at it, because if you've read the first book, I've got a chapter in there called "The Qualities of the Prince," where I did sort of a script flip, a role reversal, where I had taken a woman's what was it? I think it was Plenty of Fish, or it was OK Cupid, one of those. I took her dating profile, which was very entitled, and it pretty much laid out a list of all these qualities that she wanted to see in a guy. If you wanted to basically have sex with her, but if you wanted to be in a relationship with her, which of course means have sex with me, these are the things that you have to do. Okay, if you look at all of these things, when you ask a woman this, or you run down all this list of qualifications that a guy has to qualify himself for, has to be the burden of performance really comes into play here too, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But it's this list of attributes for guys. That is what women are attracted to, because that is what women think would benefit them the most for the rest of their lives, right? I want to be with a guy who's funny. I want to be with a guy who is, he's nice to his mom. He loves children. He likes dogs. He's still confident. It's just this nebulous confident thing, right? He's got to be cute. He's got to, there's like what Royce calls the 436 bullet point checklist, right? So he's got this list of qualities, but every single one of those qualities, when you ask a woman what is it that she's attracted to, she's going to tell you what she's attracted to. Now, what I mean then that phrase is that she's attracted to these things that are long-term, that she's looking for in a long-term provider. Okay, that's the beta need side of hypergamy. This is what she's looking for. If you ask a woman what she's hot for, what she's aroused by, then you're going to get things like six-pack abs. He's got to have, he's got to be cut. He's got to have a body fat percentage of whatever. He's got to have a symmetrical face. He's got all of these other things. Now, women don't usually say those things because it doesn't sound right. It makes them sound shallow if they start talking about, oh, he's got to have a cute butt, right? They're not going to say that, or they'll say it in other ways. They'll say it in ways like they'll go and buy the sexy fireman calendar, right? That's how they say that. That's how they express that. We talked last week about the medium is the message. Well, that's the message. If you want to know what a woman is aroused by, you're not going to get it from her with direct open communication. You're not going to get that. But if you watch her behavior, and you watch who she goes and she dates, and you watch who she's hot for, and you watch for those sort of unprompted behaviors that belie what it is that they're looking for, then you can start to figure things out. And guys do this, right? I mean, why do we go to the gym? Or why do we at least initially go to the gym? Because we want to look better. We want to sort of build ourselves up and meet a certain level of physical prowess that we know that women are aroused by. So there's arousal, and then there's attraction. So arousal is where desire is at. Okay, that's where genuine desire begins anyways. Okay, now I'm not saying that there aren't aspects of the attraction list that don't kind of cross over. There's some of them that do, that cross over from the arousal to the attraction side. But think of attraction in terms of long-term security, and think of arousal in terms of short-term sexual desire, like I want to have sex with you tonight. It's going to be a same night lay kind of thing. Okay. Now, and I just to sort of add one more element to this, I've talked about this story before, that there are guys that women will have sex with on the same night, but if they meet a guy who is that guy, they'll have sex with him. They'll have an initial or an immediate sexual spark. You know, that's what they call the sexual spark, the sexual urgency. That's where we get into to natural desire. Okay, natural, what Royce has always called vagina tingles. Okay, what makes the vagina tingle? What triggers her to the point where she's ready to have sex with a guy on the same night that she meets him? And I'm not saying that all women have to do this. I'm just saying that the desire to do that has to be there. Okay. Now, there's those guys. And then there's the guys who have boyfriend potential, right? And those are the ones that women will make more rules for. He's the guy who has to pass the shit tests. He's the guy who has to qualify himself. He's the guy who has to know how to game her. Whereas there's other guys who don't have to do that, right? They don't have to. I mean, there's a certain element of game. I'm not going to say that there's not in the arousal side of things, but he has to know how to hit those cues. He has to know how to trigger those vagina tingles. Whereas the other guy that she wants to have sex, immediately upon looking at the guy, all he has to be is cute and funny and not screw things up. Then there's the other guy who has to kind of work at it, right? And we've said this before, is that women break rules for alphas and they make rules for betas. Okay. So I'm not necessarily saying that the guy she's attracted to is always going to be beta, but the genuine desire is rooted in the arousal stages of things, not the long-term security, not the long-term comfort, not the long-term rapport, because those are anti-seductive aspects. Now, I'm saying I'm not saying that they are not needed. They are, but they are needed once you get past that arousal and that genuine desire side of things. Okay. So when I'm talking about desire, and I just got another super, so I'm just going to go here. Sorry to interrupt this. Those who restrain desire do so because, and this is 3x4 architecture, those who restrain desire do so because theirs is weak enough to be restrained. William Blake, the Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Okay. Well, that's funny that you should bring that up, because I have actually, I think that desire goes a lot further than just sexual desire. I think that, like, if you go and you look at the Bible, for example, like there's the one chapter, I think it might be even Revelations, where they talk about lukewarm Christians, right? Or lukewarm believers, and how the Lord would rather you be ice cold or burning hot, but don't be in between, because he'll spit you out of his mouth. Now that's just an analogy for I would rather have you to be genuinely desiring me or really hating me, rather, being cold, than to be just kind of like wishy-washy, or just like doing it because you're obligated to do so. And that's the other aspect I want to talk about here, is when you are negotiating desire, if you still believe that you can negotiate desire, what happens is that negotiation leads to an obligation to the woman, usually the woman. Okay. So what I mean by this is that when guys get into these situations with, like, say, the marriage counseling thing, we'll go back to the marriage counseling example here. They think that if they do more dishes, or if they change the diaper a little bit more, or if they do certain things, if they perform certain behaviors, this is all behavioral psychology. Okay. It's all behavioral modification. If I do more things, I will get the reward of sex. But that reward, or that action of sex, that reciprocation of sex on the part of the woman, is an obligation. It's not based on it's not based on genuine desire. She doesn't want to have sex with you. She does so because she knows that she is obligated to do so, and it's not enthusiastic. And we're going to talk about enthusiastic consent a little bit later in this podcast. So what is genuine desire? Well, genuine desire is primarily a impulse to want to breed with the guy, to want to have babies with that guy. I mean, it's really, you want to boil it down to an evolutionary function. It is all about reproduction. It's finding the guy that is the best genetic specimen with which to breed. It's the sexy sons theory. So where does that desire come from? And so, like, when I'm sure everybody's probably familiar with this, is that when you get into a new relationship, or when you suddenly change your relationship status on Facebook, there's about a 3 or 4 month, what we call the honeymoon period. It used to be actually the honeymoon period before premarital sex. Um, but it's that period where you just can't keep your hands off of each other, and you can't believe your luck, and you can't believe she wants to jump around on top of you, and you feel like you won the lottery, right? There must be some sort of mystical, magical force that brought, it's fate, or it's God, or it's destiny, or whatever, that brought you together. But you're not even really thinking about that at the time, because you're trying to find ways to facilitate you having sex with the girl. And the same thing is for a woman who really wants to have sex with a guy. It's the same thing. They're feeling that desire, that genuine genetic, we got to get together, we got to have sex right this second. And so what we do once we get past that honeymoon stage is we try to find ways to facilitate and keep that desire going. And that's when we kind of trip over ourselves, because we think that if we move in with a girl, that the sex is just going to keep going, right? Or if we think that we get to a point of comfort, or familiarity, that it's going to be that much better. Now, I will get into all kinds of arguments particularly with women about this, because it sounds like the wrong thing to say. But what happens is, when guys get into this situation where they think that they need to make that woman a little bit more comfortable, or if they want to be with that woman in the long term, that's when it's not that the guy is so much letting down his guard as he is easing up on the elements that led to his girlfriend's initial desire for him. Thanks, Red Man Alone. I'll read that in just a second. So what happens is, he replaces all of the things that cause sexual urgency and cause sexual tension and caused her, or I shouldn't say caused, but like engendered a natural desire in her. That's when he kind of rolls that back a little bit, because he thinks that it's a done deal. Like, it's okay, she's into me, right? So I don't have to worry about those things anymore. That's where guys get, we talk about how guys, once they get married, they give up, right? Why do I have to worry about that, right? We are on the same wavelength, man. And she enjoys me and I enjoy her, and I married my best friend. Well, you know what? I don't know about you guys, but I've never had sex with any of my best friends. So, so what does that say? Honestly, I hate that term. I absolutely hate that term when guys say, "Oh, I married my best friend." Well, all you're doing is making your otherwise desire-based relationship into a platonic-based relationship. Don't do that. That's like the kiss of death in any kind of relationship. So let me read what Red Pill Anon says here. So what if you have a boyfriend quality, 6-figure job, nice car? What about? Own your own place. Are you supposed to hide that and be your own mental point of origin? Not pedestalize her and work on your body to be seen as alpha. Okay. There is the presence, or what you're broadcasting as being alpha. If that is something that you feel as an act, if that is something that you feel like you have to put out there, you fundamentally miss the point of what is alpha. Alpha is not something it's not an act. It's who you are. It's what you honestly are, right? I tried to explain this in I think it was a couple Red Man groups ago, and we're talking about the differences between alpha and beta, and what my definition of alpha really is. If you read the first book, I've got a chapter in there called Alpha, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with the guy anymore, because it's a long time ago, but there is a guy named Corey Worthington who was about 19 or 20 years old, and I'll just put the link to that essay in the description. But a lot of guys took me to task as to using this guy as what I call the alpha Buddha. I mean, he's alpha in such a way, and he was just an example. Now the guy has since become somebody else, right? But at the time, he was what I would have called an alpha Buddha. And what I mean by that is that the guy is so alpha, he doesn't realize he's alpha. It's a natural thing for him to think of himself as being an alpha. Like, we want to conflate that with arrogance, and there is a sense of arrogance, but it's a sense of knowing yourself so well that the behaviors of being alpha come out of you naturally because you've internalized that. It's never been like forced or bred or conditioned out of you by the blue pill. It's you manifest those behaviors because that is your natural personality. That is just who you are, right? And so in that essay, in the alpha essay, I linked a video for this kid who was being grilled by kind of a hot anchor woman in Australia one time, and he was just, it was interesting to see just how his behaviors manifested his mindset, but so naturally and so fluidly that it's like, it was almost like Zen. It was like he just was alpha. He didn't try to be it. So, but to answer your question is, should you hide that kind of stuff? No, not necessarily. I mean, there's an aspect of it, but like, don't make that the key element of who you are with a girl that you're with, right? We got a call from a guy on the Red Man group one time about this guy who was saying, well, I can't get with anybody but 40-year-old single moms because I'm so rich and I've got a mansion and I bring them home and I still can't get them. So what am I doing wrong, kind of thing. And it's like, well, if that is a key element of your game or of your personality, like you saying, okay, hey, I'm going to take you back to my pad and let me introduce you to my world. That's fine. There's an aspect of wanting to do something like that. But the initial attraction, the initial arousal has to come before you bring her home. Okay. You got to do the game. Your game happens before you bring her home. Okay. And this is old school mystery method, old school pickup artistry stuff here. Okay. You can take this or leave this, whatever you want to say, but game happens before you get back to her place or your place. Game happens before you have a relationship. All right, that arousal stage, that natural desire stage. Like there's a saying, a very old saying that says that a woman knows that if she's going to have sex with you within the first 5 minutes of meeting you. I disagree with that. I think that a woman knows if she won't have sex with you within the first 5 minutes of meeting you. Right? If you are off that list, if there's no possibility of you ever getting in there with her, she knows that within the first 5 minutes of meeting you. Like if there's not that initial attraction, if there's not that genuine desire. What I find really interesting is, like, when we talk about negotiating desire, is that guys who had it and then try to get back to it, they don't understand how they lost it in the first place. They just want some magic formula to bring them back to that stage of natural desire. That stage, or the circumstances that led to that natural desire in that very first part of that is not something that you can just go back and repeat. Okay. You have to find some sort of new circumstances as opposed to trying to recreate or repeat or just in some way mimic that stuff once again. It's like you have to find new ways to do that. It's not just about that one. So anyways, I got my notes here, so I'm just going to start talking about this. So what triggers natural desire? Well, first thing you have to understand is that desire, once again, is part of the evolutionary process. It's part of arousal. That is seeing a guy who is an immediate yes. Okay. Remember, we've talked about this before. It's like, are you the hell yes guy? Are you the guy that you ask her out and she says, hell yeah, I do, or, hey, would you like to go do such and such? Yes, I will. And she makes the effort to, like, crawl over barbed wire to make that date happen, or make that meeting work. Right. That's the hell yes girl. That's the girl who has genuine desire. She's not the girl that you have to convince. One area of pickup artistry that I've always disagreed with is the idea of overcoming last minute resistance. That's the idea of, well, I got a girl and she's kind of like, her buying temperature is only like at 80%. It's not at 100%. And so I got to figure out ways to take this girl from 80% to 100%. And so that's where you throw in ideas like push and pull, when you kind of go hot and cold, or you got your back to her and then you come back once all of this. When I first started writing, a lot of the stuff that I was writing about was really about behavioral psychology. And So when I was looking at pickup artist techniques, I would say, okay, that's operant conditioning, right? It's subtle, but women pick up on those subtleties. Most guys think that women are just the equals of men because they've been taught that, and they think that they are just as blunt and just as unnuanced and just as oblivious to body language. But the fact is that women aren't that way. Men and women are different. They're not the same. And so when you do things like that, women interpret your body language, like we were talking about yesterday. They interpret like things that you do um, differently, or there's a message that's sort of connected with that. So what happens in the first place is when you're trying to initiate or you're trying to determine natural desire, you're looking for that hell yes. Okay. I don't like I said, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that you should force the issue. Okay, because if I don't want, and I've always been this way even before I even knew anything about games. Like, I always wanted to have sex with a girl who was into it with me, right? I didn't want to just have sex with a girl who was just like I had to convince. Like when we were talking about Iron Rule of Tomasi number 3, which is any girl that makes you wait for sex, the sex is never worth the wait. Okay. Now people think that when I say that, it means like, oh, you got to have sex in the first 3 dates, or you got to punish her by dumping her or nexting her, right? And then so what happens is girls come up to me and go, I can't believe you'd say that. Would you tell your daughter that? And see, you're missing the point. The point of that rule is determining genuine desire. So if you're sitting there and you like, let's just put it this way, within 3 dates, you should know if there is genuine desire to have sex with you, or there isn't, or there's games being played with you. You should know within 3 dates. Because when you get to the 4th date, then maybe who knows if you're paying for it or whatever. Now you're in the friend zone, or you're suddenly in this position where she's still trying to figure things out. She's trying to figure out whether you're worth her time or not. That natural desire that we were just talking about, that natural arousal, that time is over. You're gone. Now those conditions, like after date 2, really, those conditions are gone. I threw out, 3 strikes is a pretty, round number, right? But I would say even after the 2nd date, if you haven't figured that out, most guys can probably figure out by the 2nd date whether they're going to have sex with that girl or there is a genuine desire for that. So when I'm talking about like, don't bother with it if it's after 3 dates, or that she hasn't had sex with you. It's not so much hasn't had sex with you. Is she would she crawl over hot coals to get to you because she's that hot for you after date 3? By date 4, you're probably not her first choice. She's probably waiting to find out if one of the other guys that are her orbiters or whatever, she's trying to figure out if something else is going to work out for her. And if it doesn't, then she's going to move on, right? By date 5, you're the fool at that point. By date 6, if you're probably by date 6, you're probably a month to 2 months in by that time. Maybe 6 weeks. Okay, let's say a month and a half. At date 6, you would have to be by date 6, right? I mean, because there'd be 6 weeks, right? So if by date 6 you haven't determined that, it's not about having sex, it's determining whether or not that sex is even ever going to happen. Because once you do get to that sex, once you have sort of negotiated things, and that's why I disagree with last minute resistance, like game, like how to get a woman past this last minute resistance, particularly in this day and age, because that kind of stuff can get you in trouble. The Aziz Ansari got into trouble for that because he thought a girl's giving him a blowjob, right? He thought that she was into him, and he thought that that date was gonna go somewhere. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Aziz Ansari story, it was kind of like this halfway Me Too story for the comedian Aziz Ansari, and I will put the link in the description. I wrote an essay about that, but the reason I wrote that essay was because it was a real interesting dissection of enthusiastic consent. Okay. Because right now, women have gotten to the point where they don't have to worry about men's provisioning for them, so much so that they don't feel the need to have sex with betas. They don't have the need to consider that beta's feelings, right? Well, I bet I had sex with him because I gave him a blowjob and it kind of was expected after that. I didn't really want to have sex with him, but I did anyways. And women will call this like gray area sex, right? Like they had sex with the guy because it was too awkward not to have sex with the guy. And I'm not, and in a sense, I guess I kind of understand that, because I'm not the kind of guy who wants to have sex with a woman who doesn't want me, who isn't into me 100%, who isn't like screaming my name when we're having sex against the wall or something like that. That's the level of desire. I kind of joked around with this one time with Pat. I said, I want a woman that has so much desire for me that she will leave her family and change her religion for me. Right. And now, do I honestly, don't be a literalist, autistic spurg. Okay. I don't mean that literally, but that's the degree of desire that I'm aiming for. Is that ever going to happen? I don't know. Maybe, but it's not so much about like, oh, will she actually do something like that? It's that she would, that's inside of her, that's something, like she has that much desire. Like I saw this one story about this girl. Like guys will send me these stories about ride or die girls, right? The ride or die girl who would do anything for the guy, right? And there was this one story about this guy who had been arrested for something, and I don't even know if maybe they were fighting or something like that, but she was still, the guy was arrested. He was in handcuffs and he was in the back of the police car, and apparently the police officer wasn't paying good enough attention. I guess she jumps into the cruiser. The key, I guess the car was still going or whatever. It was getting ready to go. She jumps in the cruiser, steals the car, and tries to like pull this kind of Bonnie and Clyde kind of thing where she's saving this guy. I mean, do you have a girl that would do something like that? One of the things that I told Rich Cooper, when Rich Cooper asked me, he says, well, how should I vet a wife? And then the first thing I told him is she needs to trust you with her life. She needs to have that kind of trust, but that trust is all about the desire as well. Okay. So it's like, would a woman, does a woman trust your judgment? Does she trust what is like where you go? Is your frame the frame that she wants to live within? Is she pleased to be associated with you? Does she associate her own identity with your identity? And I got into it. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this topic today is I got into it with, and I always do this, but I had another tweet earlier this week, where I was responding to this woman who was talking about women taking their men's last names or not. Like they'll want to hyphenate their last names, or they simply, it's this trend, of course, amongst women who are these empowered, strong, independent women who don't want to have, they don't want to have the inconvenience of taking their husband's last name. I'm of the opinion that women do that because they are preparing to leave that guy. Because women who want their man, women who have a genuine desire for their man, this isn't even an afterthought for them. It's not like they're thinking, it's not like they're even thinking about it, right? And I'm just going to use myself for an example. That wasn't even an issue. There wasn't like, my wife didn't say, oh, I really don't want your name, or I'm going to hyphenate my last name. It wasn't. She's like, she started the paperwork on her own, right? She wanted my last name. She wanted to be part of my family. She wanted to be, because you build something together, right? It's this cooperative act, but it's based on a desire for that guy. That's how when we talk about frame, there has to be a desire on the part of that woman to want to be in your world. You could now, naturally, you've got to have a world that she's got to want to be invested in, but she has to have that desire. And I think that a lot of women today are sort of conditioned to believe that, that, like when we were talking 2 weeks ago, when I was talking about that date gone wrong on Dating Around, which actually turned out to be a really good episode. That woman that was in that was in that date, she would never want to be a part of this guy's life, right? You could tell that from day one. She didn't have any genuine desire for him, because the dude was already determined to be beta. She'd already put him in the beta category. He was in the beta box. Now, he probably was thinking he had a chance, or he could crawl out of that beta box, but he was already in the beta box. She was never going to take his last name. Certainly not if that was the case. Because what did she say? She said something to the effect that, people need to be independent. People need to be, I don't want to be, she'd already been married once before. I would probably guess that she probably didn't take his last name either. But that's an outward expression of desire. It's like I made the argument that when guys or when women don't want to take that name, they don't have a real genuine desire. And that's really their hindbrain kind of trying to hedge their hypergamous bets, right? It's the hindbrain thinking that this might not work out, so I don't want to. I'm strong and independent, so I don't want to have his last name, and it's just an inconvenience or it's a pain in the ass, or they'll think that it implies ownership. And I think that that's really where women, when guys will come up to me and they'll say, well, I took my wife's last name. Like, well, that just makes you that much bigger a cuck, to be honest with you. But um, the women who do these things, they don't want to take your name because they know in the back of their head that you are not their first choice. They think that they could have done better because if the guy that they had genuine desire for, they want his last name. They want to live in his world, and living in his world requires you to take his last name. And women want that. So there's that genuine desire is the precursor to all that. So when I say, like, let's look at some of these other things here. It's like what triggers genuine desire. Demonstrating higher value is the first thing. Okay. Usually that happens within like I said, the first 5 minutes of meeting you. If she sees you from like, this is where I think that a lot of these black pill guys, they do get this right. Okay. When you see a guy and you're looking at that guy and there's an immediate attraction, or the guy has a nice face, or the guy is cut, or the guy has that look, that archetypal look that she's looking for. He's playing that character that she wants to be involved with, right? It's like women are like casting agents, right? They want to, they have an idea of what the type of guy is that they want to get involved with. He's got to be cute. He's got to be funny, blah, blah, blah. Now, they'll go and they'll make all of these, I don't say demands, but they'll have like these prerequisites for who they're going to desire. Now, those kind of fall apart later on, but remember, those prerequisites are based on attraction. They're not based on desire. So in the first 5 minutes of meeting you, if a woman says, okay, he's hot, he's cute, whatever. Okay. That's why I say it's not a definite, but she knows that she will, as opposed to she won't. So there is that aspect of it. But then at that point, it's up to you. You've got to find ways to demonstrate higher value. One of those ways is, of course, social proof. Other girls have to like you. Okay. Other girls have to be around you, and you have to be pre-selected. That's where pre-selection comes from. I'm going to demystify pre-selection here in just a second. Actually, let's just do that now. Hang on 1 second. That's my phone. One of the things that evolution has sort of programmed into women is they've got what's called a hypergamous filter. Just like, kind of like how we now have like sort of red pill lens as being red pill guys. Women have a natural innate hypergamous filter. And why is that? Well, they have that because there's what's called it's an existential fear. What the existential fear is that a woman might in some way be tricked into thinking that a guy is something more than he actually is. Thanks for the super again. What that means is that women want certainty. They want to know that a guy is who he says he is. All right. It's one thing for a guy to be, cute and hot and she wants to have sex with him. It's another thing for her to have some interest in that guy in the long term. So what happens is hypergamy is all about, short-term sex, but it's also about, at the other side of the equation is it's also about long-term security. And in that long-term security, that's where the hypergamous filter comes in. She wants to know that you are, in fact, actually a doctor. She wants to know that you are, in fact, like you just made partner in your law firm. She wants to know that you are, in fact, you do love puppy dogs. Okay. She wants to know that there are aspects of you that are genuine. Because what happens is in our evolutionary past, if a woman wasn't careful about those things, if she didn't make wise decisions, she could get pregnant and have the child of a man who was not worthy of her, was not worthy of her investment, because the investment costs in bringing a child from conception all the way to birth, to raising that child until it's at least somewhat autonomous. That was still is very, very high, but back before hormonal birth control, it was super high. And so what happened is women evolved this sort of hypergamous filter. But the problem is there's a trade-off in that hypergamous filter. So a woman wants to know that you're the real deal, but Sometimes it takes a long time to do that, and sometimes in doing so, she can push a guy away who would have otherwise been a really good, mate for her. And so there's shortcuts. There are hypergamous shortcuts, and one of those hypergamous shortcuts to determine your quality, to determine you are who you say you are, is pre-selection. If other chicks are into him, then she should be into you too. Right? That's where that comes from. That's why when like early pickup artists would say, well, you need to go rolling into the club with some hot chicks on your arms so that establishes pre-selection. Right? There was that guy who did that experiment on Social Proof where the guy was not. Another link to an essay I've got. There was a video going around of this guy who was going through like a mall, or maybe, and there's another video where he went down the streets of New York at nighttime, and he had a video crew following him. And he had one guy who was kind of like his handler, right? And so he was walking around the mall, and the handler started just sort of throwing out these rumors like this guy was so and so, a famous actor in the latest Spider-Man movie, right? And within 10 minutes of him walking around and having this camera fight, and you just basically they're all faking it, right? But he had a crowd of girls coming around him wanting to get wanting to take selfies with him, wanting to get his autograph. And he was collecting phone numbers of these girls so that he could like later, call them up and see if they're interested in going out with him. Right. But it is all bullshit. But that's the power of social proof. That's the power of pre-selection. The guy did the same experiment on New York streets. And he got to the point where guys were coming up to him and wanting to take pictures of him and going up to the camera crew and later on saying, yeah, I know that guy. He was in such and such a movie, right? Just absolutely just making up stuff because they wanted to be associated with his social proof. Now, it was all a lie, but that's how those things get kind of snowball. So if you can do something like that, what's the mechanic behind that? Well, the mechanic behind that is because women need to know, they want to know that they're with a guy who is a high value guy, and they want to have that value confirmed by third parties. And so that's how that demonstration of higher value, that's that. I'm not saying go and do stuff like this. I'm just saying I'm showing you why the mechanic works or the function works. Okay, I'm going to read this real quick. You said a sign of genuine desire is her wanting to have babies with you. Girl I dated talked about it, though, in her epiphany phase. Doesn't sexy sun theory apply only to her sexual peak? Else it's baby rabies. Well, I think that that's partially true. I think that when women are in their sexual market value peak, when they get to be about 22, 23, 24 years old, you have to understand that just because it's a reproductive imperative that is driving women to make the decisions that they do, or to drive women to be aroused by guys in a certain way, just because that's happening doesn't necessarily mean that a woman is aware of that. And this comes back to like, do women have agency, or do women actually have an awareness of what it is they're doing? As guys, we like to think, I think as guys, we know ourselves better than women do. And in a way, I think that's kind of true, because when women are in that age, they're living in the moment. They're living out what their sexuality, the power that their sexuality gives them over men at that point. They're not thinking, why is this working? They're just thinking that it is working, and they're going off and they're having a good time, because that's all what the party years are for, right? I mean, party years are from 18 to about 26 or 27 years old. And so are they thinking, man, I really want to get pregnant by this guy? No, they're not thinking that. We don't even, like, guys don't even think that. We don't go, I really would like to have sex with that woman in order to have babies with her. We don't think about it in those terms. We think, oh man, she's got a hot ass, she got nice hair. Yeah, I'd really like to take her home tonight. We're not thinking about reproduction. We're just thinking about sex. There's a difference between, drawing that out and actually having a long-term thing. Like when I met my wife, okay, well, and here I'll give you a story. When I met my wife at the gig that I was playing at the time, I didn't look at her and go, man, she'd make a really good wife and a mother. I would really like to get to know her. I didn't think that. Okay. I thought, wow, she's hot. I want to have sex with her. That's all I was into. And I had sex with her by the third date. Right. We gone out, and, and it was an interest. Well, ask me about it sometime. I'll tell you. But is it baby rabies later on? Well, there is a, Red Man and on, there is an idea Actually, it's not an idea. It's a social contrivance, is what it is, or a convention is what it is. It's called the myth of the biological clock. Okay. Women, and now I'm kind of getting off subject here, but women, when they get to a certain age, one of the reasons like why you see the age of marriage keeps getting older and older for people is because women think that they can prolong having children until they can find the right guy, right? It's not about careers. It's not about, oh, I'm focusing on my career and oh my gosh, suddenly I turned 38 and now I oh, better go freeze my eggs, right? That's not, has nothing to do with it. What it has is like she's not able to have a healthy attachment with a guy. She's not able to do that. And in some ways, I'm a little bit sympathetic to women for this, but in some ways I'm not. Well, most ways I'm not, because they want hypergamy is based on doubt. Okay, is he the best that I can get? So even when that woman is with a guy who she thinks is really, really great, that question is still in the back of her head. And I think it's become worse in the last, like, say, 40 years, maybe 50 years, because women and if you read my last post, you'll understand why I'm saying this. There's a globalized sexual marketplace and women are exposed to a much larger pool of potential guys that she could get with, or she thinks that she could get with. And what that does is it makes that indecision or that hypergamous doubt that much worse. So then what do you get? Well, then you get like eat, pray, love. Then you get like divorce porn. Like, oh, I married the wrong guy. He wasn't my soulmate. My soulmate was the guy in the foam cannon party in Cancun when I was on spring break and I was 22 years old and I should have kept up with him and I should have kept things going, which is pretty much ludicrous for a woman of, like, say, 32, 33 years old. But we present women with this idea that you don't have to live with your hypergamous choice anymore. And that, so when you're talking about baby rabies should be happening really around women's sexual market value peak years. That's why I always say that there's no such thing. Well, there is such thing as a biological clock, but that biological clock should be happening or should be triggering right when a woman is at her peak fertility window. When is that? 22, 23, 24. It's not 32 years old. It's not like, oh, my clock is ticking, I better have a kid, right? I wrote a post about this. It's called The Myth of the Biological Clock. And I wrote about it because I read this one article about how women completely misunderstand their own bodies. There are guys like me who have to explain this to them, right? When you get to be 30, 31, 32 years old, your odds of conception drop dramatically. When you get to be 38, 40 years old, can you still have kids? Sure you can, if you go through fertility clinics and you do all this stuff. Like you have to like work miracles to have those kids. And can you do that? Sure you can, at a very high price. To who's going to pay that? You, the doctor, you, the kids. Who's going to pay? Who's going to pay that? It's going to be the guy who's going to pay for that. Okay. So as far as baby rabies is concerned, baby rabies is really a woman realizing that that her time is up. The sexual market value, or the sexual marketplace that she's in right now, is no longer going to support her trying to dilly-dally around and find the right guy, right? And so as women get older, it's obviously harder for them to have kids. So I'm just gonna mosey on out here. And I think I got one more, didn't I? All right. Well, if you guys have any questions right now, as far as anything that pertains to what I've been talking about, like genuine desire, I feel like I'm really playing this fast and loose here, but demonstration of higher value. There are evolutionary triggers. I think this is actually a part of. I kind of talked about this a little bit, but I've been watching a lot of old mystery method stuff lately, and I really think that mystery was ahead of his time when it came to understanding the evolutionary aspects behind why what he was doing was working. Just like I was saying a minute ago, back in our evolutionary past, and not even then, like back even prior to anything before the sexual revolution, and before we have all of this global communication, uh, your circle of people that you have, or I should say the sexual marketplace for most people was limited to a very small number of people. It wasn't the world, right? I was just talking about on my last post about how there used to be a localized sexual marketplace, and now there's a globalized sexual marketplace. And it used to be that prior to the sexual revolution, there was a localized marketplace. And what that meant was there was maybe in your town or wherever it was that you were living, or in your social circle, maybe there was 100 people. Like, how many friends do you really have, right? How many, back before hormonal birth control, um, you had a very limited number of people that could be potentially, somebody that you would want to have sex with, want to settle down with, want to have kids with. Now it's exploded to becoming the whole world. I talked about this on in my last post, but it's this globalized idea that women have more access to a global sexual marketplace, and they don't have to think about things in terms of localized sexual marketplace. And what happens is women's evolutionary filters, when it comes to hypergamous filters, they're attuned, or they're calibrated for that local sexual marketplace. They're not calibrated for a larger sexual marketplace, meaning the whole world, basically. So if I can go on Instagram, and if I'm a hot chick and I go on Instagram, I can suddenly have millions of followers, and I think that suddenly my sexual marketplace has expanded from just the people I knew in high school to the millions of people who are giving me attention on Instagram right now. So high school at 18, that's your localized sexual marketplace. When you're a cam girl at 22 years old, the world is your sexual marketplace. So those are the things that I think is interesting, because that's why we get to the point where we end up right now. It's like women sort into two types. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Women sort men into two types. That's actually, I'm glad you put that up there, Jonty, because that's exactly what Mystery was saying. There's the short-term sexual guys that they want to breed with, and there's the long-term security guys. Now, what that is that's breeding versus survival. Okay. Who do I want to breed with? Whose kids do I want to have? And that's not something that women are going, I look at this guy, I want to have sex with him because I want to have his babies. They're not thinking that. They're thinking he's hot. And that's the extension of the reproductive drive. Is if he hits my desire cues, if he hits my arousal cues, then I want to have sex with him. Well, what's the latent purpose of having sex? It's to have a baby. Okay. So I'm not saying that women do that. They don't go out, on a girls' night out and they go, who am I going to have a baby with? They go out there thinking, who am I going to have sex with? Because hormonal birth control has finally given them that opportunity. They're not stuck with just that guy. I was reading this thing in the Atlantic today about how women actually are more sexually, I don't say that they need more sexual variety, almost more than men. Like women get bored easier in a monogamous relationship than men do. Now, I disagreed with parts of that, because I think that one of the reasons why men have to stay in those monogamous relationships is because they don't have the same kind of access to breeding partners like women do. Let's see what else I got here. Women have higher investment costs, obviously. There's social proof. We talked about that. The existential fear, which is the idea that women do not, just because we have hormonal birth control, or we have less responsibility for worrying so much about a woman getting pregnant right now. Just because we have that does not turn off what we were evolved for. So women are still going to have those evolved filters, regardless of whether or not that woman thinks that she can get pregnant or she's not. Women can get an abortion anytime they want. They can even after the birth, right? Women can sort of excuse themselves really from a bad hypergamous decision now. And so, but that doesn't mean that those filters aren't still in place. It's just that if she makes a bad call based on one of those filters, that it's not something that she has to worry about for life, right? Because it's her body, her choice. Men are powerless when it comes to pregnancy, and women have all the power. So, all right. So, and then there was one other thing that I wanted to throw out here, and this is the part of, excuse me, we're getting towards the end here. I actually need to go pretty soon. I've got an errand I got to do. But there's what I wanted to call, or that's not what I want to call, but it's called the observer effect. And what the observer effect is it's observing a process changes the process. So when you are negotiating desire, when you're trying to do that kind of chore play thing, like I've talked about this before, it's like chore play is the idea that if men just did more dishes, or if men changed the diaper, if men did more around the house, did more domestic chores like that, we would think that women would need to do. If they just take some of the heat off of women around the house, that women would be more predisposed to sex with that guy. Problem is you get into this, you've just turned sex into a contract. It's now a negotiation. And so if I were to say to do something as foolish as to say, okay, let me tell you what, Mrs. Tomasi, I'm going to do the dishes 4 times a week, and I'm going to vacuum the house twice a week. And if I do that, you're going to have sex with me twice a week. Okay, deal? Great. Okay. Well, what I've done right now is I've just implemented what's called the Hawthorne effect, or it's called the observer effect, which means that whenever my wife, if that were the arrangement, whenever my wife would see me washing the dishes, what is she going to think? She's going to be thinking, well, he must want to have sex with me, right? Oh, he thinks that if he does those things, he's going to have sex with me. And so now what I've done is I've taken sex out of this natural, spontaneous, urgent, anxious realm to being something of a chore, right? That's how women will even describe sex with their husbands as a chore, right? It's something like they have to do, like, okay, I got to go and feed the dogs, I got to go take care of the kids, I got to have sex with my husband, and then I got to fold laundry, right? That it becomes that regular, spontaneous act for them. Well, why is that? Because when you are negotiating desire, you are revealing the mechanics of the game, right? One of the reasons why your wife wanted to have sex with you when you were dating her was because that was out the window. She didn't know if she was going to have sex with you. She knew you were hot. She knew you were cute. She wanted to have sex with you, but she didn't know if you were into her. She didn't know if it was going to happen, right? She probably knew you were a guy, and so you did want to have sex, but there's that tension and that competition that was in there, and now that's gone. And what you're replacing it with is this observer's effect. So when you observe a process, you change the process, because people will behave differently when they know that they're being observed. Their behaviors change. So I actually put that in the description already. It's called the Hawthorne effect. Something to look at. Okay, I'm going to do questions here for another 10 minutes, and we'll go. Redhead Stoic. I meet first dates for a drink, get there 30 minutes early, talk with the bartender, patrons, establish rapport. Good. Instant social proof when date arrives. Spun 4 plates last month, 34 to 47. Ooh. Oh, but you're 52. Okay, so that's good. All down to fuck by the second date. That's a good. I've got a buddy of mine, this guy, and I don't want to throw out his real name because he doesn't want me to use his real name, but he's got a new website that's out that is catering to guys who are post-divorce and re-establishing themselves in this new sexual marketplace. Last name is Russo. I'll just give him his last name is Russo. I forget what he's calling himself by. Anyways, writes under an assumed name. But the dude was married. He's not 52. He was 55 years old, and I think that there needs to be game needs to develop. It needs to evolve a little bit more for this decade, certainly this coming decade. I think that game is still something that's very, very valuable, but I think it needs to be updated for where we're at. But that's good. That's really good. Let's see what else is here. Thanks for your valuable wisdom. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? You don't have to necessarily give me a super chat. I will be happy to read other ones too. Oh, okay. Here we go. I'll definitely answer this. I know who XPlat is. I used to have a lot of respect for XPlat. I don't think he likes me anymore. XPlat is one of these guys who expatriated to a Southeast Asian country and seems to. I think that a lot of what XPlat talks about is domain dependency. He talks about having like 3 or 4. He basically has this kind of soft harem thing that he's got going for him. At least this is the last thing that I know of. He tends to think that desire is based on affluence or like overpowering overt dominance. But I think his situation in Southeast Asia is not really reflective of a more naturalistic sexual marketplace. When you've got girls from a third world country and you have a marginal amount of money with you, that changes the dynamic a whole lot more. Like we end up creating our own virtues out of necessities. So that's where that comes from. Let's see. What else do we have here? Why the observer effect, though? Is it when she observes you doing the dishes, or okay? Well, that's part of it, but I just use that as an example as far as the observer effect is concerned. I've said this before. When you're with women, you need to play with her and play with her. Okay, so what I mean is like you play with her and you play with her. Okay, I know that sounds kind of ludicrous, but when you start talking, like, okay, here's a better way to say it. Never tell women about the red pill. Never talk to women about the things that you're doing. Like, oh, I just read The Rational Male and I did this. Or people will ask me and they say, well, Rollo, has your wife read The Rational Male? Doesn't she know all your tricks? Right? Wouldn't she then know, like, oh, okay, now he's using this for the shit test, or now he's doing that? Like, wouldn't she know that kind of stuff? Well, the first thing I tell them is first of all, you never teach everyone all of your tricks. That's one thing. That's 48 laws of power. But the other thing is that women want to play the game. They don't want to be told that they are playing a game. And that's where the Hawthorne/observer effect comes into play. Like there's the guy who kept a spreadsheet of all the times that his girlfriend or his girlfriend or his wife wouldn't have sex with him, and recorded all of the reasons why she wouldn't, right? All on like an Excel sheet or something. And of course, what they do is they run him up the flagpole for being this insecure dude, right? Okay, I get it. But the reason, like guys are deductive. Like we want to explain why things aren't working for us or why things are working for us. I have another post called Appeals to Reason. Women don't want to have you explain to them why they won't have sex with you, or they don't want you to explain to them the game that they're playing. They just want to play that game. That's why I talk about, like, when I say women want a guy who just gets it. They want a guy who knows how to play the game instead of like talking about it. That's why I tell guys never talk about the red pill with women that you want to get with, because you are instituting the observer effect by doing that. You're saying, okay, we're playing this game now, and you're going to do this because you're hypergamous, and you're going to do this. And this is like for guys who are very analytical, very deductive, very literal, and they think that it's a good idea. Why do they think it's a good idea? Because they still think that men and women are the same. They think that if men and women are the same, if we're blank slate equals, if we both, if we both have the same potential and we're co-equal agents in the world, then I should be able to negotiate desire, right? I should be able to do that. Well, you say you want this and I want to have sex, so I'll be happy to do this. Well, how come you're not into it? They don't know. And women will say the same thing. They don't know either. No, I don't know. It's just not into it. You're not, when you talk to me like that, it doesn't feel right. Well, why is that? Because you're explaining the game to her and you're not playing the game with her. Yeah, there's a reason why they call it playing a game. Yeah. Let's see. Rollo, I believe that for a while, if a woman explains to a guy the type of guy she wants, basically giving him step-by-step instructions to get her, that's just not realistic. You're right. Because women are, I don't know if I got in trouble for this or not, but like I really don't like it when guys say, oh, you need to ask a woman what she wants. I can remember being like 14 or 15 years old and thinking, like, what do women really want? Asking these things. And what do girls say? Oh, I want a guy who's cute. How's this? I want a guy who has a good heart. What the fuck does that mean? That what that means is that she's looking for a guy, or she's telling you what she wants in a guy because it sounds right. She's not going to say, I want a guy with 6-pack abs and a nice butt and 22-inch guns. She's not going to say that. She's gonna say what sounds good for the long term. Hacker boy, what's this? Does women's hindbrains care of the origin of social proof? No, absolutely not. In fact, I just talked about that a minute ago, hacker boy. It can be manufactured. It just, remember, that's really what pickup artistry started out as, is aping the behaviors of guys who had higher value, even though you didn't have higher value. I can remember watching Tom Likas one time, and he had he had this idea that, like, if you didn't have, like, Tom, I like Tom what he says, but I think Tom is domain dependent on his own wealth, right? You can have chicks, you can have a prostitute anytime you want, right? Like TFM, Turfling Monkey is right. He's right when he says that there are no such thing as incels. If you've got $25 and you live in Carson City, Nevada, you're not an incel. You just don't want to go do it. You just don't want to go you want a chick who, and why is that? Why is it that that seems like such a bad idea? Like, why won't incels go and see a prostitute and take care of it? Like, say, I don't want to be a virgin anymore. Great, you got $100? I'll take you out there right now. You won't be a virgin anymore. It's problem solved. Well, why don't they want to do that? Because there's a part of us that believes that women can have genuine sexual desire for us. So it seems like a failure to go and pay for it. Like, I want a girl. It's not, the sex act is just getting off. Okay. I mean, why do you think pornography is so ubiquitous right now? It's because it serves a function for guys, right? We need to get off. That's what it's like taking a piss, right? I mean, we go. I think it was Tom Likas was saying it's the same function as taking a piss. Now, would we like to go take a piss in a nice 4-star hotel? Sure, with gold faucets and everything. Yeah, but you know what? If you got to take a piss, you're going to pull over to the side of the road and go find some old dirty gas station to go take a piss, right? At some point, you're going to have to do that. So what happens is, it's not about the act; it's about the desire. It's about, like, it's about this belief that a woman could love you, or that a woman could have some sort of desire for you. And I think it really kind of sucks right now. I'm glad you mentioned that, hacker boy, because I think what happens is guys still want that desire. They still believe that, but they never get past, there's certain guys who are never going to have any kind of sex other than the transactional. I think that's where MGTOW kind of comes into. It's like they understand that whoever they are, I mean, whoever they are as people, it's like when I talk, when I hear about guys like having sex with sex dolls, okay, what I see that is a utility. You're just using that to take care of a need, right? Or jerking off, or having a dog, right? To be your sort of your unconditional love or something like that. But there's that hope, or that want, or that desire. It's like, why is that a good thing to you? Rather than, why would you even have a doll? Why not just simply just jerk off to porn, right? I mean, if it's just about the function, but it's not just about the function. It's this idea that you want to have something that's like when women have two kinds of sex. They have validational sex and they have transactional sex. Most guys will only ever understand sex from a transactional point of view. In fact, they're raised and they're conditioned by the blue pill to think that that's the only kind of sex there is. Because what do we teach our blue pill guys? We teach them the old social contracts. Go get a job, go be better, go do this, go do that. Because if you do all these things, if you're negotiating, if you do all these things, a girl will want you. A girl will see you as a good catch, right? If you do all this stuff. And I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you right now, the most sex I ever had in my life was the times when I was at my poorest, at my most destitute, right? I can remember having girls come over to my 1-room studio apartment, studio, practically a freaking motel in North Hollywood in the late 80s. And I would have girls that would come over and have sex with me, like, in the morning before they would go to work, because that's just what that's what they wanted to do. It wasn't because I had, some nice bed sheets and some drapes from Bed Bath and Beyond or something like that. I don't jack shit, but women wanted to have sex with me still. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about that at all. It was that I was somebody that they wanted to have sex. I was the guy that they had genuine desire for. They got validation from having sex with me. And that was great. That was, for me, that was a new experience, because right up until that point, I believed the same lie. I believed that it's all about transactions. And then I slowly began to realize that it's not about transactions, it's about genuine desire. And when when I finally got out of my BPD relationship and I started dating after that, and I started going out and I was spinning plates at the time, and then I met my wife. I wasn't thinking, like, people say, well, how did you vet your wife, Rollo? I sure as hell didn't think, oh, well, I really want a good mother for my child. I wasn't thinking that. My first vetting, like, well, the first time I thought, hey, maybe I'm going to ask this woman to marry me, was when I was like, she's good in bed, she's fun, she's sexually adventurous. Is she somebody that I can be faithful to? And that was really my vetting part right there, was deciding whether or not she was somebody I could be faithful to, because I already had the genuine desire there, and I already knew how to sort of implement that and to bring that out, right? But I'd been in, long-term relationships before, and I was a cheater. I cheated on chicks, you know, and because I could, and because women wanted, and it didn't have anything to do with money or anything like that. It was just because they wanted to have sex with me. So I wanted to know that I could do that before. All right, so it is now 2:45 on the West Coast. I have to do a little bit of housekeeping here. I'm sorry, this probably wasn't the greatest episode, but it is what it is. So anyways, this is I got a big announcement, and if you stayed with me this whole time, you're going to get to hear this big announcement. The big announcement is I am not going to be in this studio. This is my working creative studio right here. This is where I do my other job. But I have just secured a office/studio space in Midtown where I live here, and I am going to set that up to be a more professional sound stage or sound studio thing. I'm not going to necessarily be like Louder with Crowder or Alex Jones or Joe Rogan anytime soon, but I'm going to set up this studio so that it is a dedicated space so that I can do what I'm doing right here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to expand this show to include the religion and the red pill. I'm sorry I haven't got back to that. Everybody really liked that show, and I really feel kind of bad that I haven't done much with that. But this space is going to allow me to do that. So because I've got a lot of good feedback from these. I'm already at, gosh, what am I even at right now? I think I'm at about 12,000 subs. I might be a little bit over that, but anyways, so there's definitely a need for this and definitely a desire for this. So I'm going to start doing it a little bit more often. Next time you see me on the Red Man group, I will probably be broadcasting from that studio. It might not look like much in the beginning, but I'm going to dress it up. I keep seeing like Donovan Sharp's backgrounds, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had something like that instead. Let's grab it. And so I want to be a little, I want to up my game a little bit. And so I decided that I was going to rent out a spot. So I just signed the lease papers for it just this last week. And so I will be going in there. So I've got a new place to go. And it's also a nice place to write and to do some other things too. So it's nice to have a place to go. I've been working out of my own home for a very long time. And although I always have a studio, it's nice to sort of get out of the house and go do, it makes you feel a little bit more professional. It keeps you on your toes. So I will be doing that very soon. Also, I need to once again put out the notice that I will be speaking at the 21 convention in May 3rd through 5th. So on Cinco de Mayo, I will be there. That'll be cool. I'm considering that now. This is the Patriarch's edition of the 21 convention. So if you are a father, if you plan to be a father, if you're a divorced guy who has kids, if you're just a married guy, you don't even necessarily have to have kids. If you are a little bit older, or you decide that you want to at some point establish a family later on, this is going to be your convention. Most of the guys, I think all of the guys who are speaking at it are married and have kids. And if they don't have kids, then they're just married. I'm also going to throw this out there as well, is that if you are divorced and you are trying to get yourself back into the dating market or the sexual marketplace, this is your convention. I'm not going to say that you're going to, go out and slay poon as soon as you're done with this. That's not what this convention is all about. We are not pickup artists, contrary to popular belief. We are guys who are interested in positive conventional masculinity, and we're not afraid to talk about it. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be talking about multi-generational mentorship and probably a couple other things. We've got some other workshops and things that are going on. I don't have any concrete plans to do a workshop just yet, but I will probably do something. I'll definitely announce something between now and probably the next few weeks as to what I'm going to do. So, so if you have not signed up for the 21 convention and it's something that you sounds like you want to do, it's going to be in Orlando, Florida, once again. We also have a 21 convention coming up in Poland, and then we also have the main convention, which is coming back in October. So if you want the details for that, you can just go to my website. I have a link on the sidebar to my, if you want to register through my affiliate link, which why wouldn't you? You can go ahead and do that. I had a guy on Twitter just sort of bad mouthing the 21 convention, and I get it. I mean, I understand why people think that, oh, you guys are selling out or you're selling soap. I'm not. Do you see any soap out here? I don't have any soap. Okay. But that's not what it's all about. Okay. It's about improving guys' lives. It's about, helping them form better relationships with their wives from a red pill perspective. All right. If you think that's blue pill, well, then vaya con Dios. Okay. You don't have to go to this, but this is something that I think needs to happen. It's guys that need to get together and they need to talk about this in a realistic way. We don't need any more good men projects. We don't need any more of this bullshit from what is it? Are we man enough? Okay, this is red pill, and I would not be associated with this if it were otherwise. So if you have questions about that, make sure that you go and check out my website. Like I said, there's links to it there too. Last question: will women breed with the beta if no alphas are available? Of course they will. Or they will they will prioritize things differently. Patrick, they'll prioritize things differently. Okay, that's really what the epiphany phase is about. Okay, it's women acknowledging that they can no longer compete in the sexual marketplace the way that they did, and so now they have to reprioritize their hypergamous nature, meaning like it might be fun to have the bad boys, but they still need to find that long-term security. And sometimes, like I had a guy that wrote a really great quote about the existential fear, and that's what you're really kind of getting into here is like women hate betas so much so that they will work shitty jobs and employ themselves and try to take over and to accommodate the beta buck side of hypergamy so much so because they don't want to breed with those guys. They want to breed with the alpha guys. And if that's what they have to do, then that's what they have to do. I'm going to be writing a post about this too. It'll be the existential fear. So watch for that in the coming week. So anyways, I have to go put some internet in my new office. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will be back on with Pat Campbell on Friday morning at 9:05 Eastern on his terrestrial show. That'll be this Friday. And so look for my Twitter feed for the announcements for that. I usually do it like the Thursday night before. Also still doing the Red Man Group. Please check that. Thursday, we have the Red Man Group, the Patriarchs edition, which is, again, for the guys who are married, guys who are trying to reconstruct their marriages, guys who are divorced and re-entering. Basically everything I just told you about the Patriarchs convention. This is your show. I don't know if I'm going to be on it or not this Thursday. I might. We'll see how that rock. I'm trying not to make that the Rolo and Friends show. So we'll see how it goes. Hunter Drew will be headlining that. He's the host of that version of the Red Man Group. And you can join me. Just watch my channel if you haven't subscribed. If you can look at my Patreon. The links are below. If you are interested in the Religion and Red Pill show, please leave me a comment and tell me what you want to talk about, or if that's something that interests you. I got to find a time and a day for that to make that a regular feature. So let me know about that. Again, my fourth book is going to be about religion and the red pill. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next.